Brian the Seahorse Goes to the Races. Brian the Seahorse gave a sigh of air bubbles as he watched his dad finish yet another race on the Seagrass Flats racecourse. "Well done, Daddy," said Brian, as his dad approached him, wiping the sea salt sweat from his brow. Brian's dad dropped off his jellyfish jockey and swam over to the fence where Brian was waiting for him. Brian was swept up with one fin onto his dad's back, and they made their way back to the stables to collect his dad's things. Later that evening, at the dinner table, Brian coughed as he tried to speak, and a little bubble of air rose to the ceiling. He then plucked up the courage to ask his dad to allow him to come to the races the next week and allow him to enter a race. His dad said, "No, son, you are way too young yet. Just wait until next year when your racing fins come in properly." Brian went up to his bedroom after dinner and looked in the shell mirror at his tiny fins. He tried to flap his fins like he saw his dad doing so many times while racing. All he succeeded in doing was to flap his fins a little, and he knocked his head on the side of the bed, and he lost control, and he then admitted to himself that it had been a long day, and this was all too tiring for his little body. Brian's mum came up to tuck him in and tried to comfort him by telling him that it would only be a matter of time before he could race at the racecourse. However, Brian was too impatient to wait a long time and gave another big sigh of air bubbles and lay back on his seaweed bed to dream of the future. As Brian slept, a warm current of water blew his window open and he woke up from his dreaming. He could hear his name being called from outside. As he looked out the window, he thought he heard the sound coming from beyond his house, from the vast seagrass forest. He quickly leapt from his window onto the overhanging branches of the red coral tree and climbed down to the ground. Brian then heard his name being called even more clearly and swam towards the edge of the seagrass forest. It was very dark as Brian slowly made his way through the swaying seagrasses. He suddenly saw a faint orange light ahead, and he made his way towards it. Brian wasn't scared at all. It was as if the light was calling him forward with a soft, inviting glow. The light was a lantern above the door of a rather strange and large house made from a rubber truck tire. Brian tried to look through the window, but he couldn't see anything. As he stood at the footstep, the door suddenly opened, and Brian swam backwards until he knocked over a sailor gnome in the garden. "Now look what you've done," said a rather large and purple figure in the doorway. Brian looked at the stranger and knew right away that this fine purple-finned fellow in front of him was the famous racing sea dragon named Oddsocks. Brian's father had spoken of him often. "You'd better come inside, young one, before you do any more damage," said Oddsocks. Oddsocks used to be a fine racing sea dragon, until during a race late in his career, a sea turtle blundered onto the track and Oddsocks stumbled over it and fell at the last turn. This accident ended his racing career and he retired soon after. Some say that he went a little crazy all alone, but there was another rumour that he practiced magical spells to heal the sick and practiced other magical notions and potions also. Brian went inside, and they both sat by the glowing red volcano vent to warm up. "I suppose you're wondering why my magic lantern called you to my doorstep," said Oddsocks. "Well, yes I am," said Brian. "I overheard you dreaming on the warm ocean current, and I thought I might be able to help you with your wish to become a real racing seahorse. It's been so long since I was a young sea dragon myself, and I used to dream about racing all the time. I felt sorry for you and decided to offer you my assistance," said Oddsocks. "Whatever can you do for me?" Brian sobbed. "It's going to be at least another year before my fins grow big enough for me to be able to race." Now, little one, just relax," said Oddsocks, not used to comforting little ones. "You know that if you want something so much and put all your heart and soul into dreaming about it, then it might just happen for you. Just put your fin in mine and close your eyes. You may feel a little tingling, but keep your eyes tightly closed until I say you can open them again, okay?" "Very well," said Brian nervously. Oddsocks took out a long piece of seaweed and placed it around Brian's fin, and then he put a shiny bright blue seashell on top of it. Oddsocks then began speaking in a very low tone over and over and over again, and he then placed his own fin over it and crushed the seashell and continued holding it tightly and chanting softly. Oddsocks then said to Brian, "Okay, you can open your eyes now." Brian said, "Is that all?" Oddsocks laughed loudly and said in a low voice, "Sometimes the most powerful magic of all is the simplest magic, my little one." Brian stood up and swam to the shell mirror. He couldn't believe what he saw. His fins had grown to almost twice the size they were. They were both so shiny and shimmering with colour, just like the other mature racing seahorses he had seen so often at the racing track. Brian jumped for joy and raced over to hug the wizard. Oddsocks went a little red in the cheeks and coughed a little bubble of air, as he was not used to being hugged either. "Now you can race just like your friends," said Oddsocks. Thank you, oh great Oddsocks. I'm so happy I could just explode," said Brian. "Oh, don't do that. I'd never be able to clean up the mess," said Oddsocks, laughing even more loudly. Brian gave a big goodbye wave with both of his new fins and went on his way back towards his home through the seagrass forest. Brian found it easily with the help of the orange glow of the magic lantern. He crept up the red coral tree and through the window and lay down quietly on his seaweed bed. And with his eyes slowly starting to close, he began to think of what his mummy and daddy and friends would think of his newfound racing fins. "Oh, what a great day tomorrow will be," he thought to himself as a tiny bubble of air rose from his mouth and went all the way up to the ceiling. And he finally closed his eyes for a well-earned sleep.